Hello everyone. Welcome to this Catalogue Week presentation, Augmenting the Augmentations, listing the legal proceedings of the Court of Augmentations in Series E321. I'm Dr. Dan Gosling, Principal Legal Record Specialist at the National Archives, with a focus and specialism on the legal records for the early modern period. The project, started and completed this year, provided over 5,000 new or updated descriptions for items in E321, the Court of Augmentations legal proceedings. Part 1 of the project, listing proceedings in E321 1 to 43 and 46, was completed remotely in March 2021. Part 2 of the project, listing more than 450 original decrees of the Court in E321 44 and 45, was completed in August. The Court of Augmentations was created to manage the confiscated estates of religious houses, following the dissolution of the monasteries which started in 1536. The Court of General Surveyors was set up in 1540 for the same purpose. The dissolution required a huge amount of Crown administration, and the record series held at the National Archives document this process in vast detail, from the deeds of surrender in E322, records relating to colleges and chantries in E301, original deeds in E303 and E313, and administrative and legal records of the court in E314 and E315. Both the Courts of Augmentations and General Surveyors were amalgamated into the Exchequer in Mary I's reign, hence their letter reference E, because their records ended up in the care of the Exchequer and related to Crown lands and finances. Should you wish to explore the records of the Court of Augmentations further, there's a division within E which lists the records of the Court and Associated Augmentation Office in Discovery. E321 contains the legal proceedings of the Court of Augmentations and General Surveyors. This court was set up to resolve disputes concerning lands inherited by the Crown after the dissolution, so often relate to lands and revenues formerly held by religious houses. The Court of Augmentations was an equity court, like Chancery, so proceedings began with a bill of complaint, followed by the defendant's answer, plaintiff's replication, defendant's rejoinder, and so on. And it's these records that are preserved in E321, detailing disputes concerning lands formerly held by the dissolved monasteries. Prior to this project, the only items listed in any great detail on Discovery were for pieces E3211 and E321 40 to 43 and 46, though they needed to be improved as well. The remainder in E321 2 to 39 and E321 44 and 45 were completely unlisted. Though there was no description on the catalogue, there were paper finding aids for the first 39 pieces in E321, and these were held in the map room at Kew. This meant that it would be relatively simple to create catalogue descriptions for these pieces using the finding aids. In January this year, however, those finding aids were inaccessible as the Kew site was closed. But during 2020, those of us working on cataloguing projects had adapted to find ways to complete projects remotely. The most successful of these were the projects listing the Ancient Deeds series in E326 and C146, in which we used images of the finding aids held in the map room, taken before the first lockdown in March 2020, to provide improved listings to these series on Discovery. As E321 could be completed in a similar way, I was granted special permission to come to Kew in January 2021 to photograph the finding aids for E321 bundles 1 to 39. The finding aids themselves have 5 columns: an item number, plaintiff name, defendant name, place or subject, and finally a county column. The title at the top indicates the piece number. To convert this into catalogue data, I created an Excel template including the relevant columns from the finding aids, which was then filled out using the finding aid images with the assistance of independent researcher Dr. Martin Roberts. Using the completed Excel spreadsheet, I was able to create discovery descriptions which retained all of this finding aid data. This means that discovery entries for E321, bundles 1 to 39, are now searchable by everything listed in the finding aid: plaintiff, defendant, place or subject, and county. I've also created short titles, taking the surname of the lead plaintiff and defendant, in order to be consistent with other record series relating to equity courts, such as Chancery, Star Chamber, and Exchequer. This means that if you're a researcher that's just got to grips with how one Court of Equity's documents is arranged and described, you'll have a decent idea from the catalogue description for other equity records what you'll expect to find. The finding aid from the map room gave us item descriptions for bundles 1 to 39, over 3,600 entries in total. But not all items on E321 in the catalogue were blank. Of the remaining 7 pieces, E321 40 to 43 and E321 46 had catalogue descriptions, but, as you can see from the slide, were in need of improvement. To tidy them up, a similar methodology to the first 39 bundles was used, except instead of taking descriptions from a finding aid, the existing catalogue data gave us the information we needed. Here's a new description. The short title remains the same, as does the document type, but I've added the full plaintiff, defendant, and subject descriptions taken from the cross-reference mentioned in the old description, item 18. This cross-reference was kept as a hyperlink, so if you go to E321/40/18, now you have a link to item 28. Even without the hyperlink, with these new descriptions, researchers should be able to connect these documents. Apart from the document type, all other fields are identical, so keyword searches for names, for example, will find all these related items. In total, this part of the E321 cataloging project created or improved nearly 5,000 item descriptions in Discovery. It's noteworthy that these improvements were completed without having to look at a single original document, meaning that the work could continue throughout periods of site closure. Though checks have since been made for accuracy, some descriptions may still have transcription errors, particularly for place names. However, there is now enough information on the catalogue that readers can identify documents of interest to them, and if they recognise that a place or person name should be spelled differently, they can suggest an amendment through the catalogue. Before, when there was no such description, they could not. This part of the cataloguing project revealed many interesting records relating to the dissolution of the monasteries and Tudor landholding in the mid-16th century, previously only known to those that had consulted the finding aids at Kew. For example, Anne of Cleves, Henry VIII's fourth wife, became a significant landholder in England following her annulment from Henry. Therefore, she appears as a plaintiff in 3 of the items in E321 concerning non-payment of rents due to her. Pictured is E321/22/3, one of Anne of Cleves' bills of complaint. It's addressed to Sir Edward North, the Chancellor of the Court of Augmentations, and Anne's name is given on the first line. The 2 remaining pieces in E321, 44 and 45, had no modern finding aids, but also required improvements. Description on the catalogue was sparse. In most cases, there was no description for individual items. Because it required consulting original documents, this part of the project could only begin after the National Archives reopened in April 2021. E321, 44 and 45 contain the original decrees of the Court of Augmentations, predominantly from the reign of Edward VI. Decrees were issued by a court at the end of a case, often ordering that a certain payment or fine be levied to one of the parties. One option for listing these records would have been to go through each document individually to create a catalogue description. Before committing to this option, however, I first searched Discovery for original finding aids and indexes that might speed up the listing of these decrees, over 450 in total. One possibility was to use the decree books, with transcribed contemporary copies of the decrees held in E315-105. However, though it's slightly easier to list page by page than by the loose documents in E321, 44 and 45, this book listed the decrees in the original court order, not their current order, so would have required cross-checking against the original document anyway. This contemporary index in OBS 1/793 was more useful than the E315 volume because it gave short descriptions of each decree, perfect for a discovery description. The zoomed-in image here shows that item 13 is a decree for the Mayor and Commonalty of London to enjoy a common wharf belonging to Billingsgate. But the same issue occurs here as in the E315 volume. These entries are sorted by regnal year and then item, with no key to convert them to a modern TNA reference. The solution to this problem came from the decrees themselves. Here's E321/44/2. You can see some modern notations on the left giving modern reference 44/2, and next to the Public Record Office stamp, noting again it's the second item in the series. You can compare it to the original signatures of the officers of the Court of Augmentations in the bottom right, starting with Edward North. Nothing obvious, though, to connect this modern order to the original court order. But on the back of all these decrees are original court notations. In this zoomed in image, you may be able to see the number 2 and the name Griffith Williams. Though the number 2 is the same as the modern reference, these notations were made at the time of enrolment in the 16th century. Cross-referencing the original decrees in E321, 44 and 45 to the original 16th century index in OBS 1793 allowed me to connect the modern TNA reference to the original court reference, listing by regnal year, then item number. The example of Griffith Williams from E321, 44-2 demonstrates this. Searching for item number 2 in the OBS index for the regnal year 1 Edward VI, when the decree was made, found the index entry for Griffith Williams for the enrolment of a deed made by the Duke of Norfolk. Checking the decrees in E321, 44 and 45, which all contain these original endorsements, against the OBS 1 volume, meant that I could create short discovery descriptions using this contemporary index and link it to modern item numbers. Here's an example of how the modern item numbering lined up with the original court order. Some of the decrees are still sorted in their original order, but not all. For E32145, however, there was evidence that in some cases the original order had been retained. Here are the first 34 items, tied together a little differently from the files in E32144. Entering these decrees onto the spreadsheet show that items 1 to 34 have the original numbers 34 to 1. Here's the number 34 written on the doors of E32145-1 and the index entry to confirm. This means that the binding that ties all these decrees together is likely original, bundling together the decrees in their original order. Filing documents in reverse number order was very common in the 16th century. So this is a rare example where we can see how the documents were originally arranged. This final part of the E321 project was completed in August 2021. The descriptions were taken mostly from the OBS1 indexes, and the modern place name was included alongside the 16th century name where possible. Also included was a note about the original court reference by regnal year and item number. All of this means that if you're interested in the records of the Court of Augmentations and the legal disputes connected to the dissolution of the monasteries, you can now search E321 for people and places. Thanks for listening. I hope you find these new descriptions for items in E321 useful in your research.